I never thought I'd be the kind of woman who'd fall for her daughter's fiancé. But there I was, standing in that crowded ballroom, champagne trembling in my hand, watching couples sway to music that only reminded me how alone I'd become. 6 months. That's how long it had been since Mark walked out, since he decided our 23 years together weren't enough, since he chose someone younger, someone who made him feel alive again. Those were his exact words, and I'd been trying to feel anything but numb ever since. The gala was supposed to be my re-entry into the world, my first public appearance as a divorcee, though I hated that word, hated how it felt like failure wrapped in legal terminology. I was adjusting the strap of my emerald dress when I felt it. That pull. You know the one I'm talking about, that inexplicable magnetic force that makes you look up even though you don't know why, even though there's no logical reason your body should respond before your mind does. And then I saw him. Across the room, through the sea of black tuxedos and cocktail dresses, a man was staring at me, not glancing, not casually looking, staring. His eyes were dark, intense, and they held mine with a certainty that made my breath catch in my throat. Everything else fell away. The string quartet faded to white noise. The conversations around me became muted whispers, and all I could hear was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. He was tall, probably 6'2", with dark hair that looked intentionally disheveled and a jawline that could cut glass. But it wasn't his looks that froze me in place. It was the way he looked at me, like he was searching for something, like he'd been searching for a long time, and maybe, just maybe, he'd found it. He started walking toward me, each step deliberate, purposeful, his eyes never leaving mine. I should have looked away, should have turned, should have done literally anything except stand there like a deer in headlights, but I couldn't move. My body had made a decision my mind wasn't ready to process. The distance between us closed, 20 feet, 15, 10, and with each step, something inside me awakened, something I thought had died when Mark left, something dangerous. He was 5 feet away when I heard it. "Ethan!" My daughter's voice cut through the moment like a knife, sharp and sudden and completely devastating. I watched as Lily appeared beside him, radiant in a red dress I'd helped her pick out last week, her hand sliding possessively around his arm. She was beaming, glowing with that particular kind of happiness that only comes from being completely, blissfully in love. "Mom!" she called out, waving me over with her free hand. "Mom, come here. I want you to meet someone." The world tilted on its axis. No. The man, the one who just looked at me like I was the only person in the room, was walking toward me with my daughter on his arm. My feet moved on autopilot, carrying me forward even as my brain screamed at me to run. "Mom, this is Ethan," Lily said, practically vibrating with excitement. "My fiancé." The word hit me like a physical blow. Fiancé. I forced my face into what I hoped was an appropriate expression. Surprise, joy, maternal pride, though I'm not sure I managed any of them convincingly. "It's wonderful to meet you, Mrs. Morrison," Ethan said, extending his hand. His voice was deep, warm, with a slight rasp that suggested late nights and whispered conversations. I took his hand because what else could I do? The moment our skin touched, electricity shot through me, starting at my palm and radiating outward until every nerve ending in my body was on fire. His grip was firm, confident, and he held my hand a fraction of a second longer than necessary, long enough for me to notice, long enough to wonder if he felt it too. "Please, call me Hannah," I managed, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. Lily was talking. Something about how they met, about his proposal, about wedding plans, but I couldn't focus on the words. All I could focus on was the way Ethan's thumb had brushed against my wrist when he released my hand. Accidental or intentional, I couldn't tell, didn't want to know. "We're getting married in 3 months," Lily announced, squeezing Ethan's arm. "Isn't it wonderful?" I can't believe I found him, Mom. I can't believe how lucky I am. I looked at my daughter, my beautiful, kind, trusting daughter, and felt something dark and shameful bloom in my chest. Because standing there, watching her gaze up at her fiancé with absolute adoration, all I could think about was the way he'd looked at me 30 seconds ago, the way he was still looking at me, even as Lily chattered on about venues and guest lists and color schemes. "I'm so happy for you, sweetheart," I said, and I meant it. I did. But I was also terrified, because happiness and horror aren't mutually exclusive, and in that moment, I felt them both with equal intensity. I excused myself soon after, claimed I needed the restroom, and practically ran across the ballroom floor. Inside the bathroom, I gripped the marble countertop and stared at my reflection. My makeup was perfect, my hair was styled, my dress fit like it was made for me. But my eyes looked wild, desperate, like they belonged to a woman on the edge of something she couldn't come back from. "What is wrong with you?" I whispered to my reflection. "He's going to be your son-in-law, your daughter's husband. Get it together." But when I closed my eyes, all I could see was the way he looked at me. All I could feel was the echo of his hand in mine. I stayed in that bathroom for 15 minutes, fixing makeup that didn't need fixing, breathing deeply, trying to convince myself that what I felt was just loneliness, just desperation, just the pathetic response of a middle-aged divorcee who hadn't been touched with intention in months. It wasn't real. It couldn't be real. When I finally emerged, I found Lily and Ethan on the dance floor, her head on his shoulder, his hand on the small of her back. They looked perfect together, young, in love, right. And I looked like exactly what I was, a woman who'd already had her chance at happiness and lost it. I watched them dance for exactly 30 seconds before I grabbed my coat and left. I didn't say goodbye. I just left. In the car, driving home through streets that blurred with unshed tears, I made myself a promise. I would never, ever think about Ethan that way again. He was off limits, forbidden, the one man in the entire world I couldn't have. And I would respect that, respect Lily, respect the boundaries that should never even need to be spoken. But promises are easier to make than keep, especially when the universe seems determined to test your resolve. 3 weeks later, Lily called with news that would shatter my carefully constructed walls. "Mom, Ethan and I are getting married in 3 months," she said, her voice bubbling with excitement. "I know it's fast, but when you know, right? And Mom, I need your help with everything. Will you help me plan it?" I pressed the phone against my ear, closed my eyes, and felt the world shift beneath my feet. "Of course, sweetheart," I said. "I'd love to help." The lie tasted like ash on my tongue. So me? But what else could I say? What mother says no to helping plan her only daughter's wedding? So I said yes. Yes to the dress shopping. Yes to the venue visits. Yes to the cake tastings. Yes to slowly destroying myself one wedding decision at a time. The following Tuesday, Ethan came to my house, alone. Lily had texted me that morning, casual, trusting, asking if Ethan could stop by to discuss some garden ideas for the wedding reception. She'd gotten held up at work. Could I please meet with him? Could I please spend time alone with the man I'd been trying desperately not to think about for 3 weeks? Sure, honey, no problem at all. I spent 2 hours getting ready, changing outfits 4 times before settling on casual jeans and a loose sweater that said, "I definitely didn't try." Even though I absolutely did. I made coffee, set out 2 mugs, checked my reflection obsessively, and tried to prepare myself for seeing him again. Nothing could have prepared me. When I opened the door and saw him standing on my porch, casual in jeans and a blue button-down that made his eyes look impossibly dark, my carefully constructed defenses crumbled. "Hannah," he said, and the way he said my name, soft, almost reverent, made my knees weak. "Come in," I managed, stepping aside. He smelled like cedar and something citrus, clean and masculine and completely intoxicating. We sat in my living room, the wedding binder open between us like a shield, and tried to focus on centerpieces and seating charts. But I couldn't focus. All I could think about was how his hands moved when he talked, how his voice dropped when he laughed, how his knee was 3 inches from mine. 3 inches. That's all the space between appropriate and catastrophic. "Lily mentioned your garden is struggling," he said, and I was grateful for the subject change, grateful for anything that didn't involve wedding planning. "Yeah," I admitted. "My ex-husband used to handle all that. I'm not great with plants." Ethan's expression softened. "I could take a look if you want," he offered. "I'm a landscape architect. It's kind of what I do." The way he said it, humble but confident, made me want to know everything about him. What he did, what he loved, what made him laugh at 3 a.m. I wanted to know all of it. "That would be wonderful," I said, even though I knew it was a terrible idea. We walked to the backyard together, our shoulders almost touching, and I watched as he knelt in the soil, examining my dying roses with the kind of focus most people reserve for things that actually matter. But to him, they mattered. I could see it in the way he touched the leaves, gentle, assessing, caring. "They're getting too much water," he said, looking up at me, "and not enough sun. We can fix this." "We." Such a small word. Such a dangerous implication. "I could come by this Saturday," he continued, standing and brushing dirt from his knees. "Help you replant some things. Get this garden thriving again." I should have said no, should have thanked him and politely declined, should have maintained the boundaries that were already dangerously thin. Instead, I heard myself say, "Saturday would be perfect." And I saw something flash in his eyes, relief maybe, or something else I didn't want to name. He left 20 minutes later but not before turning back at the door, his hand on the frame, his eyes holding mine. "See you Saturday, Hannah." The way he said it felt like a promise, or maybe a warning. After he left, I stood in my empty house and tried to convince myself this was fine. He was just being helpful, just being kind to his future mother-in-law, nothing more. But deep down, beneath all the rationalizations and excuses, I knew the truth. This wasn't about the garden, and Saturday wasn't just another day. It was the beginning of something I wouldn't be able to stop. Before we go any deeper into this story, if you're already feeling the tension building, go ahead and hit that like button. Let me know you're here with me. Because what happens next, you won't believe. Saturday morning, I woke up at 6 a.m., 2 full hours before Ethan was supposed to arrive. I told myself I wasn't preparing for him, that I just happened to wake up early, that the shower and the makeup and the careful outfit selection were all coincidental. But I was lying to myself. I chose a sundress, yellow, casual, flattering, and told myself it was just because it was warm outside and not because yellow looked good against my skin, not because I wanted him to notice. I made coffee, fresh, strong, and set out 2 mugs, like we were friends, like this was normal, like my heart wasn't racing every time I checked the clock. At 7:58, I heard his truck pull into the driveway, exactly 2 minutes early. I watched through the window as he got out, wearing jeans and a fitted gray t-shirt that showed off shoulders I definitely shouldn't be noticing. He had gardening tools in the bed of his truck, professional grade. And he moved with the kind of easy confidence that comes from knowing exactly what you're doing. I opened the door before he could knock. "Morning," I said, trying to sound casual, trying to ignore the way my pulse jumped when he smiled. "Morning," he replied. "Ready to save these roses?" We worked in the garden for 3 hours, side by side in the dirt, him teaching me about soil pH and proper drainage and the art of pruning, me trying desperately to focus on the plants and not on the way his voice sounded when he was passionate about something. He was patient, thorough, and watching his hands move through the soil, strong but gentle, purposeful but careful, did things to me I wasn't proud of. "You're a natural," he said at one point, and I laughed. "You're a good teacher." Our eyes met, held, and for a moment, the world went quiet. Just us, just the garden, just the undeniable pull between us that I was trying so hard to ignore. "Lunch?" I offered, breaking the moment before it could become something more. We ate sandwiches on the back porch, him telling me about growing up in foster care, about never having a real garden, about how working with plants made him feel grounded. I shared about my marriage, the edited version, where things just fell apart, rather than the truth, which was that Mark looked at me one day and decided I wasn't enough anymore, that I'd never been enough. But I didn't say that to Ethan. Didn't want him to see me as broken, even though that's exactly what I was. "You seem like someone who gives everything and asks for nothing back," Ethan said suddenly, his voice soft. The observation hit me like a punch to the chest. My eyes filled with tears before I could stop them, and I turned away quickly, embarrassed. "I'm sorry," he said immediately. "I didn't mean to." "No," I whispered, my voice thick. "You're right. That's exactly who I've been." When I looked back at him, his expression was so tender it hurt, like he saw me, really saw me. Not as Lily's mother, not as the divorcee, just me. The silence stretched between us, heavy with things we couldn't say, until he finally spoke. "You deserve more than that, Hannah." The way he said my name made my breath catch, made me wonder what it would sound like in different contexts, in the dark, in whispers, in moments we could never have. We worked until sunset, the garden transformed, thriving, beautiful again. As he packed up his tools, he moved slowly, like he was reluctant to leave. At the door, he turned back. "Same time next week?" he asked. "There's more we could do." He was talking about the garden. I knew he was talking about the garden, but it felt like he was asking something else entirely. "Yes," I said, "next week." And so it began, our Saturdays. Week 2, we worked on the vegetable garden, him teaching me about companion planting while casually mentioning that he and Lily had been arguing. Wedding stress, he said, but his eyes told a different story. I should have asked about it, should have defended my daughter, should have been the mother I was supposed to be. Instead, I just listened, validated his feelings, became the person he confided in. Week 3, we built a trellis for climbing vines, our hands touching as we held the wood steady, neither of us pulling away as quickly as we should have. And I admitted I'd been lonely, that there was a difference between being alone and being lonely. "I know exactly what you mean," he said, his voice low, and I believed him. Week 4, we installed a small fountain, the sound of running water filling the comfortable silences between our conversations. The work got done faster each week, but Ethan stayed longer. We'd sit on the porch as twilight fell, talking about everything and nothing, our knees touching, our voices dropping, our eyes holding contact a beat too long. Every touch was technically innocent, a hand on the waist to help me stand, fingers brushing as we reached for the same tool, my hand resting on his shoulder as I brushed away mulch. But the intention behind them wasn't innocent at all. Lily rarely came by anymore. "Mom, can you just handle the garden stuff with Ethan? I trust you both." The irony of that trust, the weight of it, crushed me every time she said it, but not enough to stop. Never enough to stop. Week 5, everything changed. We were sitting on the porch, the sun painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, when Ethan suddenly spoke. "I look forward to Saturdays more than anything else in my week." My heart stopped. "The garden work?" I asked, even though I knew that wasn't what he meant, even though I desperately needed him to lie. "You," he said simply. "I look forward to you." The confession hung in the air between us, impossible to take back, impossible to ignore. "Ethan," I started, but he cut me off. I know I shouldn't say it. I know it's wrong, but I can't keep pretending anymore. Hannah, I can't keep pretending that these Saturdays are just about gardening, that I don't count down the hours until I see you, that I don't think about you every moment in between. My hands were shaking. My entire body was shaking. I look forward to you, too, I whispered. The words were out before I could stop them, before I could consider the consequences, before I could remember all the reasons why this was the worst thing I could possibly say. But they were true. God help me, they were true. We sat in that confession, the weight of it settling around us like a heavy blanket, until I finally found my voice. This is wrong, I said. I know. You're marrying my daughter. I know. We should stop. I know. But neither of us moved. Neither of us left. We just sat there in the growing darkness, hands inches apart on the porch swing, close enough to touch but not touching. Not yet. When Ethan finally stood to leave, he did something that changed everything. He took my hand, not accidentally, not casually, deliberately. He held it, looked at it like it was something precious, and ran his thumb across my knuckles in a gesture so tender it made my eyes burn with tears. Hannah, he said, my name barely a whisper. I pulled my hand away, gently, because I couldn't bear to hurt him, but firmly, because I had to. You should go, I whispered. He did, but we both knew something fundamental had shifted. The boundary had been crossed, and there was no going back. If you're feeling the tension, if your heart is racing the way mine was, share this story with someone. Because what happens next, things start to spiral, and I need you here for it. The following Saturday, Ethan didn't come. I waited on the porch, coffee growing cold in my hands, watching the driveway like somehow my staring could make his truck appear. It didn't. By noon, I'd accepted he wasn't coming. By 3 p.m., I'd convinced myself it was for the best. By nightfall, I was devastated. I told myself I was relieved, that this was the universe protecting us from ourselves, that his absence was a gift. But I'd never been good at lying to myself. I stared at my phone for hours, willing it to ring, willing him to text, willing something to bridge the silence that had opened between us. Nothing came. Tuesday, Lily called asking if I wanted to come to her dress fitting. I said yes, because what else could I say? The bridal shop was all white and mirrors and judgmental sales associates who smiled too much. Lily tried on dress after dress, each one more beautiful than the last, and I sat in a velvet chair and tried not to think about the fact that she was marrying the man I was falling in love with. When she finally found the one, a stunning lace gown that made her look like a princess, she turned to me with tears in her eyes. "What do you think, Mom?" I looked at my daughter, my beautiful, trusting, completely oblivious daughter, and felt my heart shatter. "You look perfect, sweetheart," I said. And she did. She looked like every bride should look. Happy, radiant, and completely in love. And I looked like exactly what I was. A woman drowning in guilt and desire and self-loathing. "Mom, are you okay?" Lily asked, her brow furrowing. "You look pale." "Just emotional," I lied. "My baby girl is getting married." She bought it. Because why wouldn't she? Why would she ever suspect that her mother was crying for entirely different reasons? Thursday night at 9 p.m., there was a knock on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone. For a wild, terrifying, exhilarating moment, I thought maybe it was a burglar. It wasn't. I opened the door to find Ethan standing on my porch, rain-soaked, desperate, his eyes wild. "Can I come in?" he asked. Every rational part of my brain screamed at me to say no, to close the door, to protect what little remained of my integrity. Instead, I stepped aside, let him in, watched as he dripped rainwater onto my hardwood floors, his chest heaving like he'd run the entire way here. We stood in my foyer, two people who shouldn't be alone together, and I waited for him to speak. "I can't do this," he finally said. "Do what?" I asked. though I knew, God, I knew. Pretend, he said, his voice raw. Pretend that last Saturday didn't happen. Pretend I don't think about you constantly. Pretend I'm not falling for my fiancé's mother. The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs. You can't say things like that, I breathed. Why not? It's the truth. Because it destroys everything. What if everything is already destroyed? The question hung between us like a loaded gun, and I didn't have an answer. All I had were tears, hot and fast and impossible to stop. They poured down my face as every emotion I'd been suppressing for weeks came flooding out. I think about you too, I sobbed. Every day, every moment, and I hate myself for it. I hate that I wait for Saturdays. I hate that I dream about you. I hate that when I close my eyes, it's your face I see. Because she's my daughter, Ethan, my only child. And I couldn't finish. Couldn't say the words that would make it real. But Ethan stepped closer. So close I could feel the heat radiating off his rain-soaked body. Say it, he whispered. Please, Hannah, say it. I love you, I choked out. God help me. I love you. The confession shattered something inside me, some last wall I'd been hiding behind. And then Ethan's hand was on my face, wiping away my tears. His touch so gentle it made me cry harder. I love you too, he said. I love you so much. It's killing me. We were inches apart, his hand on my cheek, my hand finding his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath my palm. We could feel each other's breath, could see the reflection of our own desire in each other's eyes. Our lips were a heartbeat away. One movement, that's all it would take. One tiny movement, and we'd cross the line we could never come back from. My phone rang. The sound cut through the moment like a gunshot, sudden and devastating. I pulled back, looked at the screen. Lily. Reality crashed back in, cold and merciless. I answered the phone, my voice somehow steady despite the tears still streaming down my face. Hi, sweetheart. Lily was calling about wedding cake flavors. Vanilla versus chocolate, traditional versus modern. Such normal concerns, such innocent questions, while I stood in my foyer with her fiancé, both of us trembling with want and guilt and love we had no right to feel. I watched Ethan over the phone as Lily talked, watched him backing toward the door, watched him mouth, I have to go. I nodded, still listening to Lily discuss buttercream versus fondant, and watched the man I loved leave my house. When I finally hung up, I collapsed on the floor, and I screamed, just screamed until my throat was raw and my voice was gone and there was nothing left inside me but emptiness. Then I picked up my phone and typed out a text. We can't see each other anymore. Please respect this. For Lily. I stared at it for 20 minutes, read it over and over, knew it was the right thing to do, hated that it was the right thing to do. Finally pressed send. His response came immediately. I understand. I'm sorry. 2 sentences. That's all it took to end whatever this was between us. I blocked his number after that, deleted our entire text thread, erased every digital trace of our connection. But I couldn't erase the memories, couldn't erase the feeling of his hand on my face, couldn't erase the sound of his voice saying he loved me. The next 2 weeks were hell. I threw myself into work, stayed late at the office, avoided Lily's calls when I could manage it. When we did talk, I was distant, cold, she noticed. Mom, are you sure you're okay? You seem different. Just tired. Honey, work's been crazy. Another lie to add to the growing pile. The wedding was 3 weeks away. 21 days until I'd have to watch the man I loved marry my daughter. 21 days to figure out how to survive it. The garden started dying again. I couldn't bring myself to tend it, couldn't bear to touch the plants Ethan had helped me save. The roses drooped. The fountain ran dry. Everything beautiful he'd brought into my life began to wither. It was a metaphor I couldn't escape. One night, I went out there with a bottle of wine, sat among the dying plants under the stars, and cried until there was nothing left. Then I went to the grocery store at 11 p.m., specifically to avoid running into anyone I knew. But the universe has a sick sense of humor. I turned down the wine aisle, and there he was, Ethan, holding a bottle of whiskey, looking as broken as I felt. We froze. Two people in a fluorescent-lit grocery store, surrounded by cheap wine and terrible lighting, staring at each other like we'd just witnessed a ghost. "Hannah," he said. "I blocked your number," I replied stupidly. "I know." We stood there as other shoppers passed by, oblivious to the tragedy playing out in aisle 7. "How are you, Matty?" he asked. The question was so absurd I almost laughed. "Terrible," I said honestly. "You?" "The same." We both finished shopping, moved through the store in a daze, and somehow ended up at our cars parked near each other in the lot. And then we were talking. Actually talking. And an hour passed like minutes. He told me he'd tried to call off the wedding, that he'd sat Lily down and tried to be honest, that she'd convinced him it was just cold feet. "Is it?" I asked. "Cold feet?" Ethan looked at me, really looked at me, and shook his head. "It's not cold feet when you're in love with someone else." "Don't say that," I pleaded. "Why? It's true. I love you, Hannah. I love you more than I've ever loved anyone. Those Saturdays, those were the realest moments of my life." My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the car door to stay upright. "I love you too," I whispered. The confession felt different this time, quieter, sadder, more final. "What do we do?" Ethan asked, and the helplessness in his voice broke me. "Nothing," I said. "We do nothing. You marry Lily, I move on. This ends here." "Hannah, no," I cut him off. "We don't get to have this, Ethan. We don't get to be together. Some stories don't have happy endings, and this is one of them." Ethan reached for my hand one last time, held it like it was something precious, something sacred. "In another life," he said softly. "In another life," I agreed. Then he brought my hand to his lips, kissed it so gently I could barely feel it, and let go. Got in his car and drove away. I sat in my car in that parking lot and screamed again. Screamed until my throat burned. Screamed until the pain inside matched the pain outside. Screamed until there was nothing left. If you're devastated right now, if you're feeling the weight of impossible choices, comment below. Tell me what you would do. Because we're almost at the end, and you need to see how this resolves. Stay with me. The wedding day arrived like an execution date. I woke up at dawn, put on my navy blue mother of the bride dress, and stared at myself in the mirror. I looked elegant, put together, like a woman who hadn't spent the last 3 months falling in love with her daughter's fiancé. The ceremony was in a garden, small, intimate, beautiful. Ironic, really. I helped Lily get ready, zipped up her dress, fixed her veil, told her she looked beautiful. All of it true. None of it enough to stop the screaming inside my head. "Mom, thank you," she said, turning to hug me. "Thank you for everything, for helping plan this, for being here, for being the best mom anyone could ask for." The words were knives, each one cutting deeper than the last. Because I wasn't the best mom. I was a woman who'd betrayed her daughter in every way except physically. And that technicality didn't make me feel any better. The ceremony was beautiful. Lily walked down the aisle, radiant and glowing, while I sat in the front row and tried not to vomit. Ethan stood at the altar. He didn't look at me, not once, not during the processional, not during the vows, not during the kiss that sealed their marriage. He kept his eyes on Lily, where they should have been all along, and I kept my eyes on them both, watching the man I loved promise forever. to someone else. The vows were beautiful, traditional, full of promises about love and honor and faithfulness, promises I'd helped him break before he even made them. I cried during the ceremony. Everyone assumed it was joy. It was grief, pure, overwhelming, devastating grief. At the reception, I drank too much champagne, danced with strangers, smiled until my face hurt, and when no one was looking, I slipped out early, drove home alone, sat in my empty house, and finally let myself fall apart completely. 3 months later, I sold the house. Couldn't bear to live there anymore. Couldn't bear to see the garden or the porch or any of the places where Ethan and I had built our impossible love. I moved to a condo downtown, started therapy, began the long, painful process of rebuilding a life I'd destroyed from the inside out. Lily called every week, chatted about married life, about Ethan, about their plans for the future as I listened, pretended to be happy. Got better at pretending every time. 6 months after the wedding, I received a letter, no return address, Ethan's handwriting. Inside was a single pressed white flower, the same kind he'd planted in my garden, and a note. Some stories don't have endings. They just stop. But I'll carry our Saturdays with me forever. Thank you for showing me what it means to truly see someone. I hope you find happiness. I sat on my condo floor and held that letter for hours, read it over and over until I'd memorized every word. Then I pressed the flower in a book, closed it, put it on a shelf, and tried to move on. My phone buzzed on a dating app notification. Someone had liked my profile. I looked at the screen, thought about swiping, thought about trying again, not yet, but maybe someday. I walked to my window and looked out at the city, at all the lights and lives and stories happening below. And I whispered to the empty room, "In another life, Ethan, in another life." Because that's the truth about some loves. They're not meant to be had. They're meant to be felt, to be honored, to teach us something about ourselves we didn't know we needed to learn. I learned that love isn't always about having. Sometimes it's about letting go, about protecting what is instead of chasing what could be. Lily is happy, Ethan is adjusting. And me? I'm learning to be okay with the ghost of a love that never was, learning to carry it without letting it crush me, learning that some stories don't begin with choices. They begin with a single moment. And this was mine. The moment I looked across a crowded ballroom and saw a man who would change everything. The moment I fell in love with someone I could never have. The moment I learned that love and loss aren't opposites. They're two sides of the same impossible coin. Thank you for staying with me through this entire journey. If this story touched you, if it made you feel something real, I need you to do 3 things for me. First, hit that like button. Let me know this story mattered. Second, subscribe to this channel because I have more stories like this. Stories about love that couldn't be, about choices that break us, about moments that change everything. And third, share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who's carrying their own impossible love. Someone who needs to know they're not alone. Because you're not alone. I'm not alone. We're all carrying these stories, these loves that couldn't be, these moments that changed us. Drop a comment telling me what you felt, what you would have done differently, what this story meant to you. I read every single one. And check out my other stories in the playlist below, because everyone has a story of love that couldn't be. You're not alone. I'll see you in the next one.